We're 5 mythical immortal players with over 40,000 matches of experience, and today we will analyze the recent patch and tell you how these changes will affect the meta. Yes, we're analyzing the patch and not just reading the patch notes, so you know exactly what to expect from this update. First, we have the invincible lady, Natalia. Oh boy, here we go again. After being down in the ditch for so long because of Moonton's weird changes, they have decided to give her another adjustment. Seriously, Moonton, what even was the idea with her in the first place? So, are the adjustments exactly the thing that she needed? The main thing that changed about her kit is her invisibility mechanic. Instead of being fully invisible to the enemy, she will now just be in a camouflage state similar to Leslie. And whenever she takes damage, the camouflage states end. Though to balance it out, the duration of this state is now infinite. Well, unless you attack a target or get attacked by an enemy. Her damage is also more focused now on crits, as Moonton specifically gave her 15% extra critical chance every time you level up her ultimate. The physical attack increase was removed though. Her crit damage is also slightly increased from 140 to 150%. Her first skill deals more damage, and her second skill has a higher slow effect in the late game but lost its attack speed boost effect. In my opinion, Natalia feels balanced in a way that her camouflage nerf contrasts with her burst damage buff. Personally though, I would still prefer to keep her complete invisibility. I mean, this was the thing that made her special in the first place. Overall, it is easier to play her now, especially for beginners, and the damage buff makes it more easier to kill squishy enemies, but heroes who can target you in your camouflage state can counter you even better now. So especially those heroes with AoE skills are your worst nightmare now. Even the Layla could now end your state and reveal you, so you really have to be sneaky in order to kill your enemies. Still, compared to before, it is still a buff, and especially in lower ranks she will be a nightmare for many players. Next, we have the owner of the Axe of Doom, Aulus. Moonton wants to increase his laning sustainability in the early game while also making it easier for him to join teamfights in the late game. So they increased the cooldown of his first skill by 6 to 4 seconds, but in exchange it lasts now for 5 seconds instead of 3. And he also got a new frontal damage reduction effect. Every 10 extra physical attack increases the damage reduction by 1% and up to 60%. Meaning if you collect 600 physical attack from items, emblems, etc., you will have the full effect. The cooldown on his second skill was reduced to 5 seconds on all levels, which is an early game buff, but his attack speed bonus got reduced in the early to mid game. They also changed his HP regen, which has now a fixed value instead of relying on extra physical attack. His ultimate has no longer a lifesteal increasing effect, but a crit chance effect. And both his first damage and continuous damage bonus got reduced. Now the buffs he received are nice and make him more viable in general, but the real buff he received are through the item adjustments we will cover later. With a new crit build considering of Hearth's Claws, Berserker's Fury and the Great Dragon Spear, best item name ever by the way, combined with Blade of Despair and Malefic Roar, you can easily deal 2,000 to 3,000 crit damage with a single basic attack. He can finally cut through squishies like a hot knife through butter again, and become actually useful after getting Hearth's Claws and Berserker's Fury. Overall, it's a great buff for our Harry Leonin, and you should definitely try him out. Next, we have the solver of the world hunger problem, Alucard. Alucard has received some nice buffs in this patch, mainly focusing on his passive damage and ultimate lifesteal mechanics. For his passive, the extra damage dealt by his skill got reduced by 0.2 times, but his enhanced basic attack got buffed by 0.2 instead. I think it's a better trade-off since his enhanced basic attack is pretty much your main damage source compared to his skills. The extra damage was removed on minions though. The lifesteal from his ultimate has also been twerked a bit. Twerked? Tweaked. You now gain 5% hybrid lifesteal after every ultimate upgrade. But the hybrid lifesteal you get upon casting your ult was lowered by 13 to 15%. So now you rely less on your ultimate to get your HP back, which is definitely a nice thing. Is he going to be the next big thing in Mythical Glory story though, nope. He still has his old weaknesses like his allergy against stuns. But he got stronger overall, and in matchups where you don't face many hard CC enemies, he's even better now. Moving on to our BBD. Zhong got a major buff in this patch, and I'm sure those major Zhong mains are rejoicing right now. First, let's talk about the passive changes. The movement speed bonus he gains has been merged with his heal he gets, so when you activate his passive you get both at the same time now. But the real king is the faster HP heal you can get, as the flying speed of these Sha thingies was increased. The cooldown of his first skill was also reduced by 1 second on all levels, and importantly the spell bump ratio to minions was increased from 50% up to 100%. This is a crazy buff, as it will make your laning phase performance much better. Regen is king on the XP lane, and Zhong got multiple buffs on it. The range of his enhanced basic attack after using his second skill was also slightly increased, but his ultimate no longer deals damage when casting his big black D state, which isn't really a huge nerf. So overall this is a really good buff for him, and I'm positive we're going to see another S tier XP laner in the next tier list video. Next we have the already forgotten new marksman, Ixia. As we already predicted, she will get a buff after her initial release. She now gains 50% attack speed when she's in her old form, and the scaling of her first skill has been significantly increased, which makes it much more rewarding to build items that gives you more physical attack. To balance this out, they lower her attack speed growth from 3.45% to 2%. Overall, this buff works perfectly together with our real best build for Ixia, so make sure to check out this video if you're planning to use her. By the way, if you want a video that covers the real best build of your main hero, make sure to click on the join button and become an MLG family member today. Next we have our tiger riding lady, Irithel. Moonton thinks she's a bit weak without her ultimate, which is true, so they significantly reduced the cooldown of it by a whopping 15 seconds on all levels. To balance that out, they shortened the durations by 5 seconds to 10 seconds in total now. Overall, this buff is nice, as she can join ganks much more often now. You just need to adjust to the shorter duration and don't get caught off guard when it suddenly stops much faster. Now you can also use her ult much better as an escape dash, as the cooldown is much shorter. Overall a nice buff, but not the ultimate game changer for her. Next we have our Disney princess wannabe, Odette. Moonton listened to your feedback and brought her dash back while keeping all her previous buffs. This is actually a very nice buff for her, and you will be able to shine much more in the current meta with her. She's a more viable mage without being OP though. Next we have the hero that received the best buff in this patch because she gets a new skin soon, Lylia. No, wait, basically she received a nerf. What the F, Moonton? Her ultimate no longer restores the charges of her second skill, which was very important for Lylia to be able to deal enough damage. To balance this, the second skill has a much lower charging time now. I can't even speak because this buff what she received is like that. And you are more or less forced to build cooldown reduction items now, such as Enchanted Talisman. And the Gloom flying speed was also increased a bit. Overall, this is a major nerf for Lylia, especially since her Neo Beast skin is just right around the corner. I can already see the emergency patch coming soon. Next, we have the owner of the Great Dragon Spear, Zilong. Many beginners are rejoicing right now with their buffed favorite hero. Well, at least those who are even paying attention to the patch notes. Zilong's passive got a bit adjusted. It deals slightly more damage in the early game while also giving more HP regen. His second skill cooldown reset is also easier to trigger now, since when your minion dies 0.5 seconds after you deal damage to it, you still get the cooldown reset, meaning you don't need to use your second skill to last hit the minions anymore. I can't help but see this as a buff for beginners who struggle to last hit minions. So it's a slight laning phase buff, yes, but I think nobody believes he's going to be the next S tier XP lane hero, right? Next we have our undead horse riding guy, Liamo. He now converts crit chance into physical attack with a ratio of 1:1, and his ultimate cooldown has been lowered by 5 seconds on all levels. So it's a minor buff, but nothing to write home about. Next we have Isoya's waifu, Ruby. Moonton wants that we use more attack items on her, so they lowered the base damage of her first skill to 90 on all levels. Previously it was 90 to 250 on max level, so it's a huge base damage nerf. In exchange, they increased the total physical attack bonus from 90% to 130% on max level, which means it's generally higher once you level up this skill to level 2. They also reduced the cooldown by 1 second in the late game, so you have a 0.2 seconds shorter cooldown with every level up. I could tell you of course how this will affect her, but I can also just tell you what 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐜 told me. Overall it's a small but a nice buff. Well, unless you play her full tank, then it's not a buff of course. You can spam around her first skill more, which means more possible HP regen and damage, especially in the late game. So it's a buff, yes, but it will not shoot her up into the S tier though. Next we have our Wally boy. That sounded weird. Ling! The new emblem system and item changes made it too easy for him to get his extra crit chance. So they want to force Ling users to stack crit chance rather than focusing on building attack speed for him. They reduce his attack speed ratio by 20% down to 80%, which means if you have a 100% attack speed bonus, you only receive 80%. And they lowered the crit chance multiplier on his passive by 0.5 times to 1.5 times, meaning 30% crit chance converts into 45% crit chance in total now. Overall, it's a justified nerf, but he will still remain as one of the best junglers in the game right now, as the mobility nerf from the emblem changes made him much stronger. Next we have our alien waifu, Eve. She got yet another nerf as she is one of the, if not the best high rank mage. They lowered her second skill slows by 10% in the early game and a whopping 35% in the late game. The slow from a swipe attack got also lowered by 35% down to 40%. And since this is not enough yet, they increased the cooldown of her ult by 2 to 10 seconds, as it now has a fixed 60 seconds cooldown on all levels. Is this nerf destroying her performance? No, not really, but it's a noticeable nerf and you will feel the effect when playing her. I'm sure we will talk about her again in about 2 months when Moonton slaps another nerf on her. Next we have our former F tier tin can, Alpha. As he was too freaking OP because of the buff and the emblem changes, Moonton lowered his damage and HP regen to make him weaker in the early game. The extra physical attack bonus on his passive was lowered from 100% down to 80%, and the second skill damage was reduced in the early game from 250 to 180, while his HP regen was reduced from 100 down to 40. On max level the stats stay the same though, as this is an early game nerf. I don't think this nerf is enough though to remove him from the S tier jungle list. Yes, you will feel the lower damage and HP regen from his second skill, but it's not going to change how deadly he can be with his skill spamming ability and true damage. He will surely receive another nerf in the next patch. Unless he gets a new skin, then of course he will remain OP. Next we have the epical glowy pay to win hero, Freya. Moonton slapped a nerf on her, which was really not necessary as Freya was perfectly balanced. Strong of course, but not even close to be considered OP. They increased her second skill cooldown by 1 to 2 seconds, lowered the time to cast the skill again, so you need to cast it quicker now to avoid it going on cooldown, and reduced the attack speed bonus from max attack speed to 200% attack speed. The longer cooldown isn't the biggest problem, but the reduced time to cast the skill is going to hurt her, as it's much easier now to escape her. I always saw Freya as a B tier hero that was close to the A tier, but now she's more near the C tier than the A tier. I know some of you will comment that this nerf was justified as she is totally OP, but I still disagree with this and think this nerf was unnecessary. The next nerf was definitely not unnecessary though, as Moonton nerfed our OP edgelord Arlott once more. They increased his ultimate cooldown by 10 to 8 seconds and slightly increased the skill force swung time and added a warning effect. So you can see now the area his ult covers. Is this nerf enough to remove him from the ban list? Lol, of course not. Moonton does the same thing what they did with 1-1. They made a hero completely overpowered and now slowly nerf him to death. It will probably take another 5 to 10 nerfs before we get a balanced Arlott though, which makes me think why does Moonton even release such an OP hero in the first place? You had so much testing time and ways to make him strong but balanced in the first place, so why do you release a hero that is so OP that he's banned in over 70% of all matches? And the only reason he is not banned in 90% of the matches is because there are currently more than 6 OP heroes, which is why he has a better chance to slid through the ban phase. Next we have another edgelord, 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐵. Although he's extremely strong in the late game, his early game performance is mediocre at best. So they increased his first skill base damage by 75 in the early game and 25 in the late game. Nothing too major, but a nice little buff that is helping him a bit in the early game. Next we have the epical glory nightmare, Nana. Her early game damage is too low and she needs too long to clear a wave to rotate, so Moonton increased the base damage of her first skill by 75 in the early game and 70 in the late game. In exchange, they lowered the magic power bonus by 20%. They also slightly increased her ult base damage by 40 in the early game, but lowered it by 20 in the late game and also reduced the magic power bonus from this skill by 20%. Overall, it's a buff in my opinion. In the early game, her pokes are going to be much stronger, which will be annoying AF, and since she can clear her wave much faster now, the side laners have to expect her showing up much more often in the early game now. The magic power bonus nerf will be noticeable in the late game, but not kill her performance. Now she will not only annoy the hell out of epical glory players, but also mythic players. For the absolute highest rank, she's still too weak to be considered as a meta hero though. Still, you're not having too much fun facing her, especially if the players knows how to be annoying AF. Next we have the undead waifu, Vexana. Moonton thinks that Vexana can't use her skills and passive to quickly clear lanes in the early game, which I find weird as she can clear her wave pretty fast compared to many other mages. So they adjusted the number of deathly grasp. Moonton, I think you're drunk, you didn't adjust her for a skill. Or am I the drunk one here? Well anyway, they lowered the base damage from her passive by more than half in the early game, but increased the base damage of her second skill by 130 in the early game and 100 in the late game. In exchange, they lowered the magic power bonus on her second skill by 20%. The higher damage from her second skill is nice, so you can consider it as a small buff, but it won't change her overall performance too much though. Next we have our favorite dog in the game, Aldous. Moonton doesn't want us to promote the option of going to the mid lane with him, so they force us to adjust the script for one of our upcoming videos. You fuckers! Aldous now receives 10 instead of 4 stacks from a siege minion kill, and 5 instead of 2 if you're too dumb to last at the minion. To balance that, they lowered the damage increase per stack from 6 to 5. Here I want to do some math to explain if this is a nerf or a buff. Before you could get 120 stacks on the XP lane in the first 5 minutes of the game, which now has increased to 180 as you can get 18 stacks per wave. The damage increase per stack was lower though. So before with 120 stacks you have a total damage increase of 720, while now with 180 stacks you have a damage increase of 900. This clearly shows us that XP lane Aldous got a huge buff as you can farm your stacks much easier now, but jungler Aldous received a nerf as your stacks are less worth than before. Unless you run around last hitting siege minions, it's generally easier to collect stacks now, so you're more useful in the early game stages. But there's one more problem I want to address though. As most of you know, Aldous can only stack up to 500 stacks, which means he now has 500 less extra damage at max stacks. In most matches you won't reach that max amount of stacks, but when you do, you clearly deal less damage than before, which takes away some of his late game potential. Overall, it's still a buff for XP lane Aldous, and you should give him a try. Next we have our mummy Dracula, Alice. Similar to Aldous, she now benefits from siege minions as well, as they will drop 2 blood orbs when being killed. In exchange, they lowered her max mana increase per orb by 2 and the max mana increase per orb by 5. The number of orbs required to receive the extra movement speed is also increased by 10. Same but different, but same to Aldous. XP lane Alice received the buff, while jungler or mid lane Alice is less viable. Moving on to our undead guy, it's almost midnight now, I lost my creativity. Faramis. They increased the magic power bonus of his second skill, but lowered the max number of bounces from 3 to 2. It is what it is, an adjustment that doesn't really affect his overall performance. changes. Next, we have the item and emblem adjustments. First, let's talk about the great Dragon Spear. Who would have thought that our boy Zilong would get his own item? It gives you 70 physical attack, 10% cooldown reduction, and 20% crit chance. It also has a unique passive where if you cast your ultimate, you will gain 15% extra movement speed for 7.5 seconds. It has a cooldown of 15 seconds though, so it can't be abused by heroes like Clint who have a super short ult cooldown. As Moonton already wrote themselves, this item is for heroes who need CD reduction and crit chance. So Zilong, Aulus as already mentioned, Irithel, Alucard, or Natalia. All these heroes got a buff by the way. Coincidence? I don't think so. Next we have the revamped Harsh Claws. The item got merged with Scarlet Phantom, making it a real great first item for crit build heroes. It now costs a bit more as the price was increased by 210 gold and its physical attack got reduced from 70 down to 30, but it received a 20% attack speed and crit chance bonus. Its unique passive also got changed into Scarlet Phantoms. You will now gain 20% extra attack speed when dealing crits, so no more extra lifesteal when your HP is below 50%. It is certainly a passive buff for all heroes who use a crit build, but is also a passive nerf for those who use the Trinity build as they can't benefit from the crit chance. And they lost a bunch of physical attack and lifesteal. Next we have the Rapid Boots. It has a new effect where it reduces the effect from slows by 35%, but to balance that they lower the out of battle movement speed from 70 to 65. Does this make Rapid Boots the new meta boots? Nope, not really, but it's a nice little buff for those heroes who use them anyways. Twilight Armor is a bit more useful now as it can block more burst damage the more HP you have. Blade Armor's return damage got slightly buffed from 20% to 30%, so it is still able to counter the new lifesteal attributes from the crit items. And Steel Leg Plates got a not so nice nerf. With a huge amount of players that buy this item, it's no wonder that inflation would catch up to it. The price was increased by 100 gold from 530 to 630. It is still the best item to get some cheap physical defense that only occupies one slot. Even though the coast efficiency from Leather Jerkin is better now, it would require that you use 2 or even 3 item slots to have the same effect, which is not a viable option. This also makes Dreadnought Armor a better option when facing enemies with physical skill damage. Now to the emblem changes. The hybrid regen from the common emblem got reduced from 15 to 12. With the numbers of heroes that could abuse the OP mana regen, it's no wonder that this already got struck with a nerf. I'm sure in the next month we will see many more nerfs and buffs on the emblems itself. Some talents were also adjusted. Agility's movement speed got reduced from 5% to 4%, so fast-paced heroes or heroes who can use the assassin or support emblem have an even bigger advantage. Master Assassin's damage got increased from 4 to 5%, so it's a bit more useful. The mana regen from life drain got increased by 1%. The physical and magic defense gain from tenacity was decreased from 18 to 15. Brave Smite's HP regen got reduced from 5% to 4%, and Killing Spree HP regen got increased from 8% to 10%. So overall, the overperforming talents got a slight nerf while the underperforming talents got a slight buff. Lastly, we have the battlefield adjustments. The turtle now gives 12.5% more XP to the team that kills it, making the first turtle actually much more important than before because the XP requirements to reach level 2 to 4 has been increased by a bit, making it harder to become level 4 in the early game. To make it fair, the level requirements for level 4 to 6 has been reduced a little bit. The small jungle camps give the jungler a bit more XP compared to the previous patch though, so the junglers wouldn't be too much behind in terms of XP. But comparing it to the previous patch, it still takes a bit more time to reach level 4. Again, this makes the first turtle dance way more important as it gives your whole team a big XP boost now, which can be used to snowball and dominate the enemy. Whatever you have done before in the early game, you should now make sure to help securing the turtle, unless you're the gold laner of course. Lastly, we have the turret changes. Basically, the damage taken by turrets from magic scaling heroes has been increased from 60% to 100%, meaning it's a buff for all mages as they can push better now, but especially for those mages who were already great at pushing before, namely Harley, Chang'e, Kimmy, Nathan or Zaz. These heroes can melt turrets much faster now, which makes them a great option in solo queue. Another great option is watching watching this video where we show you the 20 best heroes to rank up in Season 29 in solo queue. Also a huge shout out to our MLG family members, especially the Mythical Glory members like Fanny Bootcamp and Pro Gamer. See you over there!